Hey guys, it's Dani. Today we're gonna talk about fragrant Vanda orchids. I have a Vandaceous orchid which I just purchased. She is in bloom and I really wanted to make a spotlight and also talk a little bit more about other Vandaceous types of orchids that I own which are fragrant, because if you didn't know they existed, absolutely, Vandas can be fragrant as well. But first of all, let's see who this little beauty is. This is the Aerides houlletiana. You might know, you guys picked this one for me. I made an order to Orchid Garden and asked you guys to pick between two Aerideses, and you guys picked this one. So I actually wanted to film it right now because, as you can see, some of the flowers are already fading. And this is because, if you remember, this orchid arrived with two long roots, but not much else. And this is actually taking a toll on the plant. Vandas require a lot of water, particularly when they're in bloom. And you can see by the look of the foliage, she is not getting enough water due to the flowers. Flowers drain a lot of energy from plants. So if you will, this is the equivalent of a shriveled pseudobulb. She does have roots and I do water her twice a day, but it simply isn't enough. And the flower spike of this orchid is not made up of 5 big flowers. There's a multitude of flowers here. There are many of them which have already been spent, so there is a lot of energy loss. But anyway, I did get to enjoy this beautiful cluster of blooms quite a bit, and I'm sure that with proper care the blooms will last longer. But for now, let's see what is so special about the Aerides houlletiana, since it is actually a very popular Vandaceous orchid. Well, what makes these orchids popular are the blooms themselves. As I was saying, the flower spike has a very unique shape. It is actually pendant. So unlike the Vanda hybrids that we're acquainted to, these flower spikes arise from between the leaves, but then as the buds develop, they kind of fall under their own weight and form this little pendant cluster of blooms, which is absolutely fantastic. And if the orchid is in very good health and has a tremendous root system, the cluster can be quite long. There are a few varieties that actually produce very long clusters, and the Retusa is one of them. Oh, she's on my wish list. But anyway, the houlletiana can produce a better display than this, obviously. The flowers can vary from one individual to the other. My particular one doesn't have that beautiful orange color that I was expecting it to have, but it does have a wonderful contrast between a pure yellow and a light purple lip. The flower shape is unique as well. If you take a close look, you'll see it looks nothing like the typical Vandas. They're not rounded and phalaenopsis-y, if you will, moth, if I can call it like that, shaped. They look more like a bird. Yet again, I have a thing with birds. To me, it looks like a bird in flight, which is just landing. The lip is extended forward and it's actually much bigger than the sepals and petals. And if you remember the typical Vanda you find in flower shops, the lip is really tiny in comparison to the petals and sepals. Well, this one is the other way around. So the shape is absolutely different as well. All Aerides orchids do have this shape and they produce this cluster of blooms. And all of the buds open sequentially. First, you have the oldest buds, if I can call them like that, they're gonna open, and then the other buds towards the tip of the flower spike will open completely. And under normal circumstances, all of the flowers will be open and they will last at least a month. But as I was saying, mine has a little issue. I just received this orchid. She has to adjust to my environment. She has to produce a new root system, so it's understandable. So keep in mind the flower display can be a lot better than this one, and not only the orchid can actually produce 2 flower spikes. And this orchid did have 2 flower spikes. One of them was broken. I'm not sure if in transport or before it was shipped to me, but yeah, it had 2 flower spikes. One of them didn't make it. So you can imagine how beautiful the display can be. Now, this is not the best part. What I find the best part is the fragrance. This orchid is tremendously fragrant. It smells like lemons, like citrus. Not the citrus flowers, but the citrus fruits in general. It smells very lemony and citrusy. Yes, I repeated the word a lot, but I'm trying to make a point here. It's absolutely mouth-watering to me. It is one of those fragrances that I absolutely love. If you will, it smells like a lemonade. There we go. I think that's a very good description for it. The smell is not sour and doesn't make you cringe in any way. It's just a beautiful waft of sweet citrus. it smells during daytime but more strongly in the morning. And right now this orchid is residing outside, and there was a lovely breeze the other day. It was carrying the fragrance 1 or 2 meters away, and it was absolutely wonderful. Aerides orchids are actually fragrant, if I'm not mistaken, all of them. If there is a species or two which is not fragrant, there might be, but most of the ones that we find in cultivation, they are fragrant. And as people suggest, this is not the most fragrant Aerides. The odorata should be the most fragrant, so you can imagine how curious I am about that one too. Aerides orchids are actually more to my liking than the proper Vandas. Yes, I do like the Vandas and their beautiful big flowers, but I do prefer this display a lot better. You can see it's also more compact. It's not awkward when I move around with this orchid, when I water it. The risk of me breaking off the flower spike is not all that big, and also the spike is very flexible. In comparison to typical Vanda flower spikes, which are rigid, this one is pretty flexible, and I would say bump proof. And this is why I'm saying Aerides are a little bit closer to my heart. I like them a little bit more. I can give up big flashy flowers for a pendant display. I'm a sucker for pendant displays, and also fragrance. Vanda and Vandaceous orchids have amazing fragrances. I think of them a little bit like cattleyas. They have floral, fruity fragrances that are easy to like. They're not weird like the catasetums. Have you noticed the catasetum type orchids? They have a very specific fragrance which not everybody likes. Well, Vandas, they're not necessarily like that. They have beautiful fragrances for the main part. But just because the Aerides has mostly fragrant individuals doesn't necessarily mean that Vandas cannot compete. Let me show you a few more Vandaceous orchids which I have in my collection and are very fragrant. The ones that I actually saw in bloom. I do have a lot of fragrant Vandas, but they didn't bloom because they're recent. However, I do have a few which bloomed. This is the Vanda denisoniana, and this particular variety is the Creme Shinehorn. It has green-yellow flowers, and we had this orchid in bloom last year. I'll play a few images on the screen right now for you from last year. This is an amazingly fragrant orchid which tops almost all of the orchids in my collection. Even though, I'm gonna be fully honest with you, I don't really care for the flowers all that much. They have that green-yellow color which does not do anything for me, but the fragrance just absolutely compensates. This orchid is a nighttime fragrant orchid. Yes, Vandas can be nighttime fragrant. The smell reminds me of honeysuckle. It's just so beautiful and honey-like, and it really isn't mild. It can fill up a room, and I had it in the living room last year. I brought it in the house. It did fill up the living room in the nighttime. The flower display, in my opinion, is not as showy as the Aerides one because it does have a little bit bigger flowers, not as big as the Vanda hybrids, let's say the Pacharas, but the flowers are full of substance, they're waxy, and they are really charming. Overall though, the fragrance absolutely compensates with this orchid. Therefore, I think everybody who loves Vandas should have the denisoniana in their collection. There are two more varieties of the denisoniana. There is the proper goldeny yellow one, which is absolutely beautiful, a little more to my liking, and there is the orange one, which I have supposedly, and I might actually have the golden one as well. I don't know, I have a few denisonianas to be fully honest with you, but one of them is mislabeled, so I'm not sure what varieties I have. This one, it bloomed, so I know it's a Creme Shinehorn. And having multiple varieties is not a bad thing. If you're a fan of the greeny yellow color, absolutely go for it. All of the denisonianas are beautiful. They have the same flower shape, pretty much the same fragrance, a very intense nighttime honeysuckle fragrance. The only downside is that these orchids are very big. Another Vanda orchid which is very fragrant is the Vanda Nuit Palmer. This is a hybrid and it looks a lot more like the commercial Vandas, like the Pacharas for example. Flowers have a lovely purple tessellation, and if my memory serves me right, it smells very much like sweet roses combined with chocolate. In any case, it has a very sweet syrupy fragrance. Now, I received mine in a not so ideal condition, so the flowers didn't last all that long, but they lasted enough for me to tell that this one again is a must-have if you absolutely love Vandas, and moreover you want some fragrant Vandas. This one smells during the daytime, not the nighttime, but it's not a small orchid. It does take quite a lot of space, pretty much just like the Vanda Orchids, so it's up to you to decide if it's worth the space in your growing area. And the last orchid we're gonna focus on is the Wrinkle Bangkok Sunset. This is a hybrid between the Wrinkle stylus and the Aerides genuses. And it is a tiny orchid which looks a little bit more like the Aerides. It produces tiny flowers, but the flower spikes are not pendant, they're not even long enough to become pendant. However, it has a charm of its own. The flower display is absolutely beautiful. Like the name suggests, it reminds me of a sunset. It has lovely shades of orange, yellow, and purple. And fragrance-wise, it has a lovely, flowery, fresh fragrance, not necessarily sweet or lemony or anything of the sorts. It is pretty subtle, but pretty noticeable, so it's just perfect for those of you who do have some issues with very strong fragrances. It is again a daytime fragrant orchid, and it produces a lot of tiny little flowers on a medium-sized spike. There's nothing really big about this orchid. It is pretty tiny and compact, and it's just perfect for tiny growing spaces. I have this orchid already for 4 years and it's still pretty tiny. It didn't grow a whole lot. Lengthwise or widthwise, it's not gonna grow much. It will only continue growing on a vertical level, but it does so very, very slow. So you'll not end up with a monster of an orchid in no time. So even though we focused on only a few orchids right now, I do have quite a few other fragrant orchids. I have Wrinkle stylus gigantea, 2 varieties actually, some other Denisonianas, the tricolor, a few varieties again. So I'm looking forward to more fragrant blooms, but for now these have been the ones that have bloomed for me. But from now on I will try to enlarge my Vanda collection because I do have more space right now. Vandas generally are not the friendliest with tiny growing spaces and with home growing in general. So if you have limited space and you've always wanted a Vanda which looks good but also smells incredible, now you have a few options. Check the description down below for a few more names, titles that I'm looking for purchasing as well. Google them and see which one you like best, and there we have it. Fragrant Vandas, not a problem. You can find them at Orchid Nurseries, and the one that we made the spotlight of today, the Aerides houlletiana, is a very, very common or popular orchid. I absolutely love it. I do recommend it. It has a wonderful, wonderful fragrance. I just cannot have enough of it. Mind you though, if you don't like lemons much or citrus smells, you might not like it. It's pretty powerful. But with that said, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. Hope you've enjoyed it, and you know the drill. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe to my channel for regular orchid videos, spotlights, tutorials, and things of the sorts. And if you like YouTube to remind you whenever I post a new video, just turn on all notifications for my channel. And with that said, I'll see you all next time. Bye!